for me as a Christian theologian, now co-hosting a conference on Sufism, of course the ending was very interesting, about the question if there is only one light. In a way, I thought throughout the film, this is some kind of presupposition. You are, of course, showing us very specific Islamic rituals, but what your interviewees talk about are basic human feelings. How do you see this kind of universality and specificity on the topic of light and what it symbolizes?
Yeah, that's at least one thing that's nice about working with light is that it's a phenomenon that we all relate to somehow. Like we couldn't look at each other without light, of course, and light is also a big part of most spiritual, if not all spiritual traditions, some variety of light. So it's something that connects us, I think. And so I think also displaces when you're stuck in identity fetishism or stuck in with different very harsh differences that are drawn up, then it's nice to work on a topic that really just transgresses all of that and immediately takes us into something that crosses those boundaries. So that's also what I think what I'm attracted to around this topic. I'm not sure if that was the initial thought. It was really quite a naive beginning. As you see in the film, it is not a very well thought out project initially. So it's.
You think so?
But I definitely think that's what was giving energy to the project, that it had that dimension. So taking us into kinds of sensory experiences and emotional experiences that are not necessarily restricted to one particular tradition of Islam or one particular religious tradition beyond Islam.
How did you find all these interviewees? How did you have a plethora of material in which you selected from? How did you approach?
Of course, there's when you make a project over 8 years, there will be lots of material. But I think in anthropology we call it snowballing. Instead of what randomly offers itself. So friends of friends, their friends, coincidental meetings, and in the end we ended up focusing especially on those events where, where, like for example, when you see the scene with Aya, the young woman, I had by coincidence been present at this event, Laylatul Qadr, so the night of power or destiny, or how you want to translate it. So, which is usually celebrated at the end of Ramadan, or thought to happen at the end of Ramadan. So a particular special night, good for prayer, lots of angels around. So I had been present there to film in this situation because I knew this was a special event and lots of songs and stuff. And then she happened to be there, and she had we didn't know each other, but she had as you saw in the film, or as I hope you saw in the film, she had a very powerful experience of sort of feeling connected to the group. She was not part of the group at that point. And basically joined the group on that night, and I was there with the camera, and then I didn't know exactly what was going on inside of her, except that I could see that it was something strong. But then when we interview, when I asked for an interview, could we meet a couple of days after, and then we ended up talking about what went on inside of her for 2 hours, and it was this seeing light and those things. So we ended up focusing, and the same like with the old guy you see later on in the film, Maher. It's also a situation where I'm jumping on this bus to go to the maqam, the grave of the sheikh of that group, Sidi Salah, and he's also on the bus, and then so we ended up focusing on those situations where I was there at those moments, and then so that's pretty much what dictated the film.
I'm not sure if we have questions from the online audience. Then we could take some
written comments. And there's a raised hand.
Yes, we could take this, I think.
Yeah,
Thank you. Georgia.
I'm trying. You can hear me?
Yes.
Good morning. I'm Giorgia Rubera. I'm Italian, and I'm very happy to share with you. I work at CNR in Italy, but I'm finalizing my PhD at the University of Granada on a thesis of contemporary Islamic art. So I'm very happy to meet this conference now. It's an anthropological path, look at Sufi path, try to communicating incommunicable, the incommunicable, no? And return the term of translate the experience, no? I participated, I don't know if I speak English not very good.
Just that you were falling out the last sentence, can you repeat that?
My thesis is about an anthropological research, look at Sufi path, try to communicate the incommunicable, no? Returns the theme of try to, how difficult it is to explain this state, no? And I have participated a lot of Dikr and Adra in Tunis and in Sevilla, in Spain, at Shadilia, Zawiya Shadilia. And so I'm very happy to see Shadilia in Cairo, no? And I think how can communicate this, no? And so it can be done through art, no? The question is how art can help us to explain this experience, no, that are incommunicable. I don't know if you understand me, because my English is not very good.
Yes. There was one scene in the movie where you talked about this, about capturing or explaining or putting into words, and also the connection to the visual was present in this discussion.
To the what?
To the dimension of the visual. Like Georgia just said, art maybe is a mean of communicating the incommunicable. Or your interviewee, he likened it to explaining a dream. Do you have an idea about how art is different from explanation in just words when it comes to topics like that?
Thanks for the comment, Georgia, and I look forward to learning more about your work, which is very close to my interest as well. And
now I'm doing a work about a Spanish Sufi artist that called Ashin Cabrera, that he worked on metaphysical of light in Ishraq, no? And so it becomes light and deep. So
I think I'm a filmmaker and an anthropology scholar, and I work both with writing and film, and I think film and writing both offer aesthetic possibilities, and I think even in the driest academic writing there is an aesthetic. Maybe we don't, like, sometimes we replicate particular kinds of aesthetics laid out by journals or something, but it's still like an argument can be beautiful in a way sometimes. So I think this attention to aesthetics is of course really important in any kind of writing and in film, and and there well, in a film like this, yes, that's why we use film, to try to see, could we have sometimes just a taste of something, even if it's never going to be as if, you can't live my experience, but we can maybe use film as a way to discuss or have a dialogue of sharing, a space for sharing some experiences, which I think can complement what we can do in writing. So I also like writing a lot, and I think sometimes writing is very good for saying very specific, stating something very specific, or stating a conclusion about something, which film is really awful at. Film always sticks out, such as the image of you where there is lines sticking out, and I can only see half of your body, and how long is your hair actually? An image is always carrying us outside the frame, and sort of can't see the backside of you as well. So it's always like showing us something, but also showing us what it doesn't show. So it disturbs our conceptual grasp, and I like that disturbance, the way in which we might, writing and words and that kind of knowledge can destabilize our way of seeing and experiencing, and the other way around, how something like a film can destabilize our conceptual grasp. And I think that's what happens. That's what we try to also incorporate in the film by sometimes having our discussion. So in that scene, you see Mohammed Mustafa, who I really see him as the co-director of the film, but he's too humble to take the credit. So he wanted to only be editor, but he was very important throughout this process too. And we wanted to see if we could add something like that, like our thoughts around what are we doing, and our difficulties and our disagreements as well about how to work around this, and also using that to sort of continue the massage of how we experience, and maybe also sometimes adding a question mark to what it is that we're experiencing when watching someone sharing an experience, where maybe we identify with the person, but there is it's still important to keep a gap open, or that we don't
because it returns a lot of time, because I'm not able to communicate, this difficulty of communicate the state, and so I think the art is the poetry on the visual art are the best way to communicate this kind of state that one person can aspire.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I really enjoyed when seeing Mohammed edit some of the scenes that he worked on, because he was quite skeptical of some of my ideas. As you see, we often disagree in a friendly way, but then working with the material and editing it really also was a way for him to dwell on the tradition that he's part of, and the community that he's part of, and sometimes being actually very touched by re-seeing it and sort of re-experiencing it through this gaze. So yeah, for me it was a beautiful process, and I think for him as well.
Now we have Eileen.
Hi, so I'm seeing both two Christians right now.
Yes.
And in our Turkish culture, when you actually stand between two people whose names are the same, you can make a wish, and we believe it's going to come true. So I can make a wish right now. All right. Christians are, I really, loved enjoying the documentary, the movie that you just shared with us. Thank you so much. I think it's a very difficult and a challenging task to be able to observe light and, to put it in a movie, to put it in a documentary, which is totally unseen and unknown to many people. That was a very courageous attempt. Thank you so much. And I really found all the people that got involved in the movie so sincere. They talked so much from the heart, from the bottom of their hearts, including yourself. Thank you so much for your testimony. And there was also another elderly man in two scenes. I was literally, crying. That really did touch my heart. I think you may all know that light upon light is also mentioned in the Quran in Surah 35, verse 35. And there is also a symbolic, symbolic image there. There is a niche, and there is a lamp that got lit by the oil of a very special olive tree. All right. And that olive tree is neither in the west nor in the east. It's like a barzakh, it's just in the middle, maybe belonging everywhere, just getting rid of all these opposites and dualities and so forth. So that really made me think of that surah. After watching your movie, I really thought of the image of the oil lamp and the olive tree. There is also, I come also from a Sufi lineage, from Kenan Rifai's, from Cemal Nursargat's in Istanbul, Rifai lineage. And in the commentaries of my Murshid and my, Kenan Rifai's commentaries, it also mentions that the olive has got only one single seed. And that is the manifestation, you can say, or the illusion to oneness, to unity, because it's got one seed, And this is one of the very few vegetables, I don't know, I'm not very sure if olive is considered to be a vegetable or a fruit, maybe none of them, I don't know. So let's say food, that's one of the very few food that is mentioned in the Quran. And the other one is the pomegranate. And it's got a lot of seeds, inside, and it may allude to a multiplicity, to plurality, to kesret, as we say. So one has got one seed, olive tree, referring to oneness, and which is also, a tool for the manifestation of the light upon light. And the other one is pomegranate, which seems to be one, all right, but there are a lot of seeds in it. So this is what, multiplicity is. It's actually one, but inside is different, but it's the oneness of being. So both images can actually also be very nice tools for the movie, I think. And I really congratulate you on thinking of moving on with the theme of love, because I think light and love, they're all hand in hand, and I wish you the best of good luck. The continuation.
Thank you. And yeah, of course, this passage in the Quran is important to us and became part of, and it's mentioned in quite a few of the du'as that you hear. And it was precisely this light upon light. So God is light, but then there's also light upon light, and this strange image that is projected in that surah, I think contains some of. I liked how you mentioned pomegranate and olives as two sort of ways of thinking about the many and the one. It had something like that. So that could be a beautiful title for a film, Pomegranate and Olive.
So it can be nice tools for your documents. There's just one more thing that I'd like to add. This is the teaching of my own Murshid, Jamal Nur Sargut. She once said, actually, the olive tree itself is the symbol, or it alludes to the perfected human being, Kamil insan, or insan kamil, or we've also, witnessed the love towards insan kamil, towards their sheikh in your movie as well, which also, goes hand in hand with what the Quran says and with what, people in Cairo or in Egypt practice. And that's also very good to see.
I'm thinking if I can ask you this. There was also an ambivalence of light. Yeah. Usually light is associated with the divine, and of course with ultimate happiness. But when you spoke about it, it was associated also with uncertainty, maybe loss, which is a association not so in the foreground. But if one would try and look, maybe you would also find it as a common connection.
Yes. I mean, we went about this project looking for light and nice stuff and freshly pressed orange juice and nice spiritual experiences, and I wasn't aware that, of course I knew I had gone through a very difficult period in my private life, but I wasn't really connecting it to this project directly. So we ended up far down south in the eastern desert, at this huge mulid for Sidi Abul Hassan al-Shazili. And I got very ill, and then I had this dream where I was reliving this difficult moment, and there was a bit of a surprise, of course, to go through that in this way. But afterwards, I realized that it had actually been sort of murmuring, or like it had been it had been there throughout this process in different places. I also realized that when going through the rushes in the editing, that somehow this was also driving the process, and there was some sort of, you could even say, therapeutic aspect to this project that I didn't realize before this moment. But it was somehow it was a very special moment, and in some way a strange way of working through that. What else can I say? That maybe so in a way, for me it was a relieving. It was so relieving to somehow be pushed back into that space that I had sort of tabooed a bit in my private life, because it was a moment of a lot of doubt and or a long time, not just a moment, but anyway, so there's a lot of light in that. Even if it's difficult, but I think there's also maybe sometimes there can be like almost like a light deficit or something like this. Like if you have had a lot of light, there needs to be some darkness as well.
Yeah.
Like
yeah. If everything would be light, there would be no.
And the darkness has a quality of, can be luminous in other ways as well. So anyway, it was a tricky thing to put into the film. Actually, we tried to edit the film without this scene, but it didn't work. And so in the end, we kind of had to say, okay, this happened. It was actually driving. It was part of the drive of the film. We don't know if it's permissible to have anthropologists crying that much in their films, but it needs to be there because it happened, and it was part of the film, so it's there. But, yeah.
No.
I'd just like to say that I really enjoyed it, and cinematically, I thought it was very well done, very effective. For example, you show the contrast between light and dark, or the interplay between light and shadow very well in the film. I think that could be very easily overblown in a film about light. Do focus too much on it, but I thought it was very subtle. It was there. It was consistent, persistent, but not overly emphasized. So I thought it was very effective. The way you narratively, the way you can begin with this idea, well, we're going to do this project. How are we going to do it? And then you end with the same idea, well, we're doing this project. And throughout, that referring back to this project. So you're kind of driving the narrative along. That's very effective. The interplay between the interviews with people and how they express, how they try to live their lives in this world, but also find some deeper meaning through the metaphor of light, with how people actually could do rituals or do service in order to bring that about. I thought that was very effective. Just as a film, it flowed very well. It was very effective. In terms of content, it's very rich. There's a lot of food for thought, you might say. One thing that caught my attention, my particular focus is, on light, for example, and how in Islamic discourse it's represented. So something that caught my eye that I don't think you consciously tried to emphasize, but there's a lot of rich material for, is how people, when they try to explain the Islamic view of light, they refer to the Prophet Muhammad. So there's a lot of lines like the light of the Prophet, or the light is the Prophet of God. And I didn't mention the light verse where the term light upon light actually comes from. That's not the light of Muhammad that's being expressed, it's the light of God. It begins, God is the light of the heavens and the earth. Allah But when people try to live that or to express their feelings about that, they refer to the Prophet. Or, the tradition I work with, the Alevis, Bektashis in Turkey, they refer to things in terms of Ali, or the 12 Imams, or this duality or this unity of Muhammad and Ali, or local Anatolian saints like Hajj Bektash. In Christianity, there's always this, of course there's God, but there's Jesus as that kind of focus of attention, focus of worship, and mediator between us and that divine experience. And so even in Islam, that most strongly monotheistic of religions, there's still this tendency to find some kind of material human model for how to reach that divine experience. And then I'm thinking the motif of light itself, that itself, light in reality, that physical light is not really the point, it's not the goal. That's a tool to see things. But we still take that tool to be the symbol of our aspirations or our longings. And then that gets extended to these physical kind of human models. And so I thought the film just presented a lot of material to think with. So, thank you.
So that's a great comment. I think we need to ask you to write that down as a review. We need reviews of the film. But I want to just comment on this issue, because it's definitely there. It's not, as you say, it's not. We're not like pushing it that far. Also because it's a very controversial part of these practices, you could say. Like, so if I take, and we actually did that. Like, we were also filming with some of the people I work with in Denmark, were of a more orthodox or new orthodox, some would say Salafi orientation, where something like calling the Prophet light is a complex thing.
Well, there's another verse in the Quran that mentions Muhammad specifically as the Siraj al-Munir, the shining light.
Yeah. So
there is that.
There is.
Muhammad,
there is.
Muhammad in
yeah.
there.
Yeah. But actually, some of the people that you see in this film, they would take the verse of light to be describing, like often you hear that it describes, that it's a metaphor for talking about the heart. But they would say that this heart is Muhammad, and that's the big heart that we're all encapsulated in. And so they would be quite going quite far with this Muhammad as the manifestation of a light, or the light cast into the world, or something. It's all of these. And for me, maybe it could be also interesting for you. I think those. Then it comes very close to what would be ways of talking about Jesus in a Christian context, as really very close to the divine, and not just a human being, a historical figure, but something that is manifesting the. Anyway, I'm not strong on the theological part, so I'll leave it to you to think about that. But it's definitely an issue that fills a lot in the film, and that's controversial. And also, like in when we premiered at Cairo IFF, it really was received quite well. We were scared, especially for those kinds of discussions, because they can be full of tensions and about who's on which side of shirk or whatever. Luckily, it was not like that. It was really received well. But those were some of the questions that were discussed afterwards. Yeah.
Just a very brief comment that the Nur Muhammad is, of course, the primordial light. So this primordial aspect is very central ingredient, actually.
In what?
In most Sufi.
Yeah.
Sufi beliefs. So the Nur Muhammad is, of course, but it's a primordial. It's not really Muhammad. It's not directly the Prophet, but it's the primordial covenant that the Prophet made before.
Yeah.
So it's connected to the first man. It's primordial, because Adam, of course, is also this primordial life.
Yeah.
So
it's actually a very interesting point, because of course there's this whole very complex theology behind it. You see these women explaining it in very personal terms, and it would be very interesting to see where they got their knowledge from and how they speak with this authority on this topic. They really express a kind of authority.
Yeah.
So that this gendered religious authority, what seems to be lay people, I find really fascinating there.
Yeah.
They don't talk in terms of like the primordial essence of Muhammad.
Yeah.
As a person who happens also to be light.
I think it's very close to what you say. Like I think I could easily have stayed with those women for a whole film, but I think they would say, if I'm not saying too much, but I'll try to. Like they would say that the Prophet Muhammad is this primordial light that encompasses all the light in this world, and is the manifestation of the light of God cast into this world, and encompasses all the prophets within. So all the prophets is a manifestation of that. And us as well, right? So I think it's very close to what you say, that they would try to express there in that moment. Maybe they have slightly other idioms to speak about it.
Yeah, it's a very vast subject, I think.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of research on this too, not on the Muhammadi.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think the nice, for me, always the nice aspect is that it's before it's way before the Prophet.
As a historical figure,
is
yes.
Primordial life,
Yes,
you know,
yes,
and
yes.
then,
Yeah.
It's cast upon the Prophet, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's all embracing.
Yeah. So it's interesting for me how quickly it gets politicized and divisive. So so there was something to like you should only say just this much too much, and then you'll end up in some troubles about whether you have made a kind of heretical statement. So in the current situation in Egypt, so they're really walking a fine line in the way that they discuss these things.